preaching through the book of First Peter, and in First Peter chapter 3, the verses 18 to 22, the whole book has been about suffering, but in this verse 18 of First Peter chapter 3, it says that Christ also suffered once for the sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit. This morning, as we anticipate and get ready to celebrate the Lord, that Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, celebrating around the table, I want to take this opportunity today in my sermon to do something different. I want to take us through the 4 Gospels and look at the events of that day. It's out of the ESV Bible. Let me begin. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. He said to them, "My soul is sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little further, he fell down on his face and he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down to the ground. And he rose from prayer. He came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation." Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew of this place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, being one of the 12, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, he went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. And while Jesus was speaking to his disciples, there came the crowd, and Judas was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him, for this was the sign that he had given them. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, "I am he." When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. He asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "Of those whom you gave me, I have not lost one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it might be so? Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" And he touched the ear, and he healed it. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple and the elders who'd come out against him, he said, Have you come out as against a robber
with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled. A young man was following him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body, and they seized him. But he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that day. He questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings, and Jesus answered him, "I've spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I say is right, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, "Prophesy, who is it that struck you?" And they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes. They led him away to their council, and they said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" Jesus said, "You say that I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We've heard it from ourselves, from his own lips." And they bound him, and they led him away and delivered him over to Pilate the governor. They began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man misleading our nation, forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea and from Galilee even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. When he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but Jesus made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. Herod and his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends that day. Before this, they'd been at enmity with each other. Pilate called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, and he said, "You brought me this man as one who's misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him." Now Jesus, when he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Pilate said to Jesus, "Don't you hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Pilate entered his headquarters again. He called Jesus and he said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say that to you?" Pilate answered him, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus said, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I've come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with this righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." So Pilate went back outside to the Jews and he said, "I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." So a third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. When Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water, washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So Pilate released for them Barabbas and delivered Jesus to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. They gathered the whole battalion before him. They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him. And they took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to be crucified. As they were leading him away, they seized Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and they laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting him. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 others, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And from noon until 3 o'clock, it was dark. And the people stood by, watching. But the rulers were still scoffing and saying, He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. The soldiers also mocked, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. There was an inscription over his head on the cross saying, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who was hanging with him railed at him, saying, Are you not this Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he turned to Jesus and he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it, to see whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture, which says that they divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So the soldiers did these things. Standing by the cross were Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, in order to fulfill Scripture, said, I thirst. A jar full of sour wine stood there, so they put a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he called out, It is finished. And he bowed his head and he gave up the spirit. Since it was the day of preparation, and so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came, and they broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. Oh, I missed the line. When they came to Jesus, they saw he was already dead, so they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. He who saw it has borne witness. His testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, that you also may believe. For these things took place that the scripture might be fulfilled, that not one of his bones will be broken. And another scripture that says, they will look on him whom they have pierced. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, he also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight. So they took the body of Jesus. They bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. And in the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, there was a tomb in which no one had yet been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. It's Friday. We know what happened. The disciples didn't. It's Friday, but Sunday's a coming, isn't it? Starting in the book of Acts and through the rest of the New Testament, we read often about the significance of this day. For Christ suffered once for all, also suffered once for the sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, and that being put to death in the flesh would be made alive in the spirit. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. And he has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. He entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by the means of his own blood, thus securing eternal redemption. And so we will share at the Lord's table this morning. For as often as we eat this bread and drink this cup, we will proclaim